Hello everyone, welcome to MK Sportscars How-To Guide. In this episode we're going to be talking to you about how we fit the rocker mechanisms for the push-rod suspension on the MK Indy RR RX5 chassis. These are all fabricated in-house and these are going to fit onto the front of the chassis in this formation. The parts that are required to fit the rocker assemblies: you have 4 roller bearings, outers, 4 inner bearings for the roller bearings to work on, 2 M6 by 30 washers, 2 M6 by 16mm bolts, 1 blade for scraping off the powder coat, a sharp knife, 19mm piece of tubing, got a hammer, an M10 ratchet spanner, and a centre punch, bearing grease and some gloves for protection really. First thing I'm going to talk about is preparation of the actual shaft, stub axle here that we're going to be putting the bearings onto. Stub axle here, when it's powder coated, sometimes you have powder coating that sits completely around this edge here. You do need to clean this powder coating off, enabling the bearing to sit down. There is a tool for that, as we say. This will be a sharp blade, either two, to clear off all of the powder coat in this area. You can use this blade or this blade, these either will work for you. So to fit the inner part of the bearing, as I said earlier, we'll take the inner shaft, we'll test fit this. If this is a loose fit, a slightly looser fit onto here, there's a way around this. Using a punch and a small hammer, just tap into there, into the shaft. Again onto the other side. And again onto this side. Once you've tapped onto the shaft, sliding the bearing on, you'll see that also now will not slide on and it will make a tight fit. And if you drive that into place with a 19mm tube, this fits tight. As a precaution, we're just going to put one just at the end of that there. That will stop that from actually pulling out in any way, shape or form. Then we take the second one, we check it for play here again, there's slight movement, and we repeat. Line up, ensuring that this is flush fit here. And then again with your centre punch just on behind the bearing carrier, centre punch. That's going to stop that bearing from sliding in now. Repeat the process on the same on this side, checking again. "19mm tube" and just drive it home. And the final centre punch behind the rear. And that's how you fit the inner part of the rocker roller bearing assembly. What we're going to cut to next, we're going to go to the other workbench and we're going to press in these bearings into the actual rockers. So now we're going to press the roller bearings into the actual rocker assembly. Must ensure that you're working in a reasonably clean environment here. Obviously you've got bearings and grease, you don't want any grime getting in them. We've just laid some tissue down in here, so environment clean all the workbench off to make sure there's nothing there. Quite simply, you're going to grease up the bearing and the rocker. If you can do a close-up of this, you can see the rollers in here, inside of the bearing. We're just going to use a multi-purpose bearing grease here. This is going to go inside the bearing and inside. Okay, now we're going to offer up the bearing to the rocker. And using the vise, it's a very light, easy push fit on these. Using the vise, we've actually used 2 pieces of aluminium in here just for protection in it. Just lightly press this in. Until it's fully seated. And repeat on the other side. Okay, so now that both the roller bearings have been fitted inside of the actual rocker assembly, just in the centre here on this, there is also an additional grease nipple for servicing the product later on, if it needs a re-grease. So we're now back at the car with the assembled rockers. We're going to prepare the area again, greasing up with multi-purpose bearing grease, the shafts that will hold the bearing carriers. Just ensure there's plenty of packing grease in here. As I say, there is a grease nipple in there if you need to top them up further. As you can see, nicely greased, ready for the rockers. So the rocker itself, this is a very important stage of the process. The rocker itself is a one orientation only. The correct orientation, as you can see by the rocker, has one longer arm and one shorter arm. The rocker assembly must go in this orientation. So once you line up for the bearing in seat, tool for this stage of the process, being a bit more gentle, is the rubber hammer. And you just want to gently persuade this over the first cover and then onto second. Clean off any surplus grease that's come through and just double checking that's fully seated into the back area and that there's free play on the rocker. Perfect. And now repeat with the same rocker onto the other side, lining up with the longer section of the rocker facing inwards, and drive that home gently with a rubber hammer. Cleaning off the surplus grease before we drive that home. Ensure there's free play. And that you're seated here. You'll also see, you can see on the section here that the inner bearing is seated nicely. It hasn't moved in any way, shape or form. Where you've put those centre punch marks, that's seated into there correctly. So that the bearing is able to freely move on both sides. So with the rockers now fitted, they now need to be secured into position. And for securing the rockers, we're using the M6 by 30mm washer and a 16mm bolt. And for added security, we're going to be using a medium strength Loctite. Thread on and into position. 10mm socket. And yeah, ensuring they're just really medium tight. You do not want to be doing more than about 10 foot-pounds if you want to do it with a torque wrench. And then allow that, making sure, once you've tightened that up, that the bearing is free running still and the rocker can move on its own accord. And then repeat with the other side. M6 washer, M6 nut, medium strength thread lock, and your 10mm socket. Again, just nip up with your free hand. Do not need to lean on this really tight. The thread lock will hold it in position. It's just for maintaining and holding the bearing in position. So now that's a completed set of front rockers for the MK Indy RR, RX5 and the RR chassis, all the same mechanisms we use. And if you like what we do, check us out at www.mksportscars.com, or if you want to subscribe to our videos, it'll be some there down here, you can say subscribe. come and check us out. Hopefully you'll come and see us again in the next episode, where we'll be showing some other factual information on how-to guides on the MK Indy.